My name is Carl Novak. I'm 57 years old, and my son called on a Tuesday night to ask me not to come to his company Gala. He didn't say it that way at first. He worked up to it the way he used to work up to telling me his grades weren't good. Like if he softened the approach long enough, the thing itself would hurt less. "Dad," he said, "this dinner, it's black tie, corporate clients, the whole thing. My boss is going to have investors at her table. She said she wants the room to feel cohesive." He stopped. "She saw your work history. She thinks it might be a distraction." I set my coffee mug flat on the counter. "Is that what you think?" I asked. A long pause. "No," he said, quieter. "I don't know, Dad. She signs my reviews. This job is everything right now." "I'll stay home," I said. "Go have a good night." "Dad." "Dylan." I kept my voice even. "I mean it. Go enjoy it. You've earned this." He exhaled like a man let off a hook he hadn't wanted to be on. There's a reason the man who built his company crossed a banquet room at a dead run the first time he saw my face. There's a reason he stopped the whole evening, the dinner, the speeches, 200 guests, to say my name out loud. I didn't arrange any of it. I didn't even see it coming. But let me take you back to where this started. I spent 32 years as a boilermaker. That's a trade most people don't know the name of until they need one. Pressure vessels, high-temperature pipe, refineries, power plants, paper mills. If it holds pressure and runs hot and has to work without failing. That was my world. I retired 3 years ago with a clean record and a bad knee and no regrets. My wife passed 8 years back, pancreatic cancer. We had 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and I spent every one of them trying to be as present as I knew how to be, which was never quite as present as she deserved. She left me a son who is too smart for his own good and a house that's too quiet in the evenings. Dylan is 32. He got his business degree from Penn State and went into logistics and distribution, which is about as far from boiler making as a man can get while still moving heavy things around. He works for a company called Stanton Group, regional distribution out of Philadelphia. 2 months before that gala, he was promoted to regional director for the Mid-Atlantic. Youngest one they'd ever made, he told me, and I heard how much he needed me to be proud. I am. That was never the question. The woman who told him not to bring me was his boss. Her name was Barbara, VP of Operations, his direct superior, the kind of person who describes herself as particular as though that's a compliment. Dylan had mentioned her before, always carefully, the way you mentioned someone standing just outside the room. I'd gathered she had very specific ideas about what success looked like and who fit inside the frame of it. The night of the gala, I watched a baseball game and went to bed early. Dylan texted around 10. "Got the award for top regional growth. Thanks for understanding." I typed back. "Proud of you. Talk tomorrow." Set the phone face down and lay in the dark. It's a particular kind of loneliness, being told your presence is a problem. It doesn't announce itself as grief. It settles in slow, somewhere behind the sternum, and doesn't move. My sister Peggy, she lives 20 minutes away and has had strong opinions about everything for 55 years, came over for dinner that Sunday. She read my face before I'd finished saying hello. I told her all of it. She put her fork down. "You're going to that dinner," she said. "I'm not." "Carl, this woman is teaching your son to be ashamed of you." "She's doing what serves her," I said, getting up to clear plates. "Dylan is the one making the choice. I'm not putting him in the middle of a fight on the best night of his professional life." "So you just vanish." "I make it easy for him to breathe. That's different." She wanted to argue, and she knew I'd decided. She left still annoyed, which is her right. I've never needed Peggy to agree with me. I just needed to say the thing out loud to someone who knew me well enough to push back, so I could hear myself hold firm. 3 weeks later, I was cleaning out the bedroom closet, top shelf. Moved a duffel bag I hadn't touched in years and found the shoebox behind it. My wife used to call it my junk drawer in a box. Old pay stubs, a pocket knife I'd thought was lost, a union card from '98. Underneath all of it, a letter. Cream-colored paper, a logo in the corner, Stanton Group. Handwritten in blue ink dated 22 years ago. "Mr. Novak, I've tried to write this 3 times. There's no version that feels like enough. You kept me alive in that building. You stayed when everyone else ran. When the ceiling came down, you were still there, pulling me clear. I don't know how to put words to what that means. My name is George Stanton. I'm the man whose life you saved at the Braddock facility on March 14th, 2004. I've been looking for a way to say thank you ever since. I don't think there is one. But I want you to know that everything I build from here, I build because of what you did. If there is ever anything... George Stanton. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Braddock, March of 2004. A refinery outside Pittsburgh, a Tuesday morning, an explosion in the secondary boiler room. I'd been on contract there 6 weeks. I heard the blast from the yard, ran in against the current of everyone coming out, and found a young man. Couldn't have been more than 28. Pinned under a section of collapsed ceiling. Head wound bleeding hard, going in and out. I stayed with him. Pulled debris off piece by piece. Kept talking. Got him out about 4 minutes before the second collapse. Brought the rest of the roof down. I never got his name. He went by ambulance. I went back to work the next morning. I read the letter again. George Stanton. Stanton Group. The same company. The same name on Dylan's paychecks for 4 years. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time. I could have called Dylan right then. Could have called Peggy. I didn't, because the first thought that came up wasn't anything like satisfaction. It was a question. Now that I hold this, what kind of man am I going to be about it? I put the letter back in the shoebox, put the shoebox back on the shelf, and I made a decision, alone in that bedroom with nobody watching. I was not going to use it. The man in that building hadn't been a CEO to me. He'd been a person in trouble. I hadn't run into a burning refinery, calculating the return. I'd run in because that's what you do when someone needs help. The day I cashed that in to settle a score with a woman who hurt my pride is the day I become someone I'd be ashamed of. And I'd had enough shame in my house for 1 season. Dylan called on a Thursday late afternoon. He sounded different, quieter, like something had changed position in him. At the Gala, he said, Barbara was talking to one of the clients. She didn't know I was close enough to hear. She said, Dylan's talented, but you know how it is with first-generation corporate types. The polish isn't always there. His voice went tight. She laughed. The client laughed. I waited. First generation. Like where I came from is something to apologize for. Like you are something to apologize for. He stopped. I asked you not to come because of her, Dad. And that's the thing I'm most ashamed of. Not of you, of myself. Something loosened in my chest. There it was, my son finding his way back. You see it now, I said. I see it. A long breath. George Stanton does a spring luncheon, informal at his place out in Chester County. Directors and their families, he makes a point of that. Families, it's next month. He paused. I want you there. I don't care what Barbara thinks. I said yes without hesitating. I put on the navy sport coat from Dylan's college graduation, a little worn at the elbows, still fits, and drove out to Chester County on a Saturday in April with the windows down. The luncheon was at a farmhouse the size of a small hotel, all stone and old wood and a pasture running down to a creek, tables set up outside under open sky. The kind of beautiful that doesn't try. I was standing near the terrace railing when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. Moving fast, I turned. He was in his late 50s now, silver at the temples, a little heavier than the face in my memory, but the jaw was the same, the way his eyes found you and didn't move. He stopped 2 feet away. Carl Novak, he said, not a question, a statement, like a man who had rehearsed saying a name for 20 years. George, I said. He put his hand out and I shook it, and he held on a moment longer than a handshake calls for. I wrote you a letter, he said. I kept it, I said. Something moved across his face that I won't try to describe. He told me he'd tried to find me, had hired someone about 10 years in. The contractor records were gone, the union hall had no forwarding address. Dylan mentioned his father was a boilermaker, he said. He said it like a weather fact. I had no idea. He shook his head slowly. 22 years. People nearby had started to notice. There's something I'd like to do, George said, glancing back at the tables where his team had gathered. The directors, their families, Barbara among them. With her head tilted at an angle she probably thought looked composed. It's your house, I said. He turned to the terrace and spoke without a microphone, clear and unhurried, the way a man speaks when he knows the room will follow. Before we start, I want to introduce someone. This is Carl Novak. He's Dylan's father. He paused. The terrace went quiet. 22 years ago, Carl was on contract at a refinery outside Pittsburgh when an explosion brought down part of the structure. I was trapped inside. Carl came in after the blast and pulled me out 4 minutes before the rest of the roof collapsed. He let that sit for a moment. I built this company because he gave me a life to build it with. I've been trying to thank him for 2 decades. I'm glad I finally have the chance. No one said anything for a moment. Dylan was standing at a table 10 feet away. I watched his face move through it, disbelief first, then something slower, the feeling of a room rearranging itself into a shape you should have seen coming. He crossed the terrace and stood beside me. Didn't hug me, just put his shoulder against mine, the way he used to when he was small, and wanted me to know he was there without making a thing of it. "You never told me," he said quietly. "You never needed to know." "Dad." "I did a job," I said. "A man needed help and I helped him. That's not a story, that's just a Tuesday." Barbara materialized at the edge of my vision, still wearing that careful smile. She said something about what a remarkable coincidence. George looked at her the way you look at an addition that doesn't come out right, and moved on. George and I talked through most of the lunch. He told me about the company, about the years of thinking about the man in the building. I told him about the work, about my wife, about watching Dylan grow up. At one point he said, "I want to do something for you. Just tell me." I shook my head. "You've taken good care of my son," I said. "That's worth more than anything you could hand me." He looked at me a long moment, then he nodded, once the way men nod when they recognize something that can't be argued past. Dylan called before I'd made it out of Chester County. I picked up on the Bluetooth. "I owe you a real apology," he said, "not just for the gala. For letting someone make me see you as a liability. You were never a liability. You were the thing I was most proud of, and I let fear make me forget it." He paused. "I'm done moving you out of the frame. Whatever that costs me professionally, I'm done with it." We talked until I got home. I sat in the driveway for a few minutes after we hung up. The sun was down, clear night, more stars than you usually get this close to the city. Barbara left the company that fall. Nobody said exactly why, and I didn't ask. The following April, George's luncheon again. Dylan brought a woman he'd been seeing, and they both came to pick me up so we could drive out together. My seat was next to George's. Same navy sport coat, good coffee and better conversation, and the kind of afternoon that doesn't feel like it needs to be anything other than what it is. At one point George asked how I'd held on to that letter for 22 years, without ever sending a reply, without ever reaching out. I thought about it. "Because you didn't owe me anything," I said, "and I didn't need you to." He sat with that. A boilermaker builds things to hold pressure. The whole job is understanding what a structure can carry, and building it so the seams never show the strain. You do it right, and nobody thinks about it. The thing just works. People move through their lives never knowing the name of the man who made sure the walls held. That has always been fine with me. There's a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet. Inside it is a letter on cream paper with a logo in the corner, written in blue ink by a man who has since built something that matters, because someone kept him alive long enough to do it. I have never needed that letter for anything. I never will. A wall built right doesn't need anyone's permission to stand. Neither does a man,